Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Melanin Margin, the weekly chat show where conversations about race are never off the table. We're your hosts, Quaviondre Williams.
And Daquon Wilson.
So let's get into this week's conversation. What's hot on the table this week? On top of being an actress and a comedian, Tiffany Haddish can now add children's book author to her resume. Haddish recently released her children's book, Layla, The Last Black Unicorn, which follows the titular character Layla as she enters her first year of school. Haddish told E! That the book was, quote, inspired by my childhood and how different I was and how hard it was for me to fit in, realizing that my differences can be my wins and it can help others. So I wanted to share that with kids. Also, growing up, I didn't see too many books by Black female authors, so I thought this was a good way to start kicking that door open, unquote. Haddish wanted to tell a story of self-discovery and self-acceptance journey because Haddish told People magazine, quote, I think everyone grapples with the questions, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? How do I fit in here? And just being able to take a moment and say, I'm okay with the way I am, even if somebody else doesn't agree. As long as I feel good about how I am, then there's nothing that I need to change, unquote. Haddish hopes that this book can serve as an inspiration for many young people to love and learn how to be themselves, as well as strengthen the bonds between parents and their children by sparking conversation. So, Daquon, I wanted to ask, what was your experience growing up in terms of reading books by Black authors and or having Black protagonists?
I'm gonna be honest, it was a little dry at first. It was a little few and far between. Like, I think growing up, the first book, in a school setting that I remember reading that like centered Black voices and Black protagonists, and I'm not sure if it had a Black, I think it did, but the first books that I remember were The Watsons Go to Birmingham and Bud
Mm-hmm.
Not Buddy. And I remember those books so vividly because it was like one of the first times that I feel like I felt represented and I saw somebody that could very well be somebody related to me, represented. And, growing up even further, like there would be occasions where, you get like a Langston Hughes poem every Black History Month or something like that. And it's like, I think that's also why as I got older, I gravitated towards the Harlem Renaissance because I felt like, oh, the only time Black people were writing were during the Harlem Renaissance. Like, because we
Mm.
don't learn about that history. We don't learn about a whole litany of Black authors and Black books and all of these different things written by Black people, about Black people, for Black people, even at predominantly Black schools, primary schools and secondary schools. And so it's so powerful when you have that representation because it makes you feel seen. It can engage a student that's never really been that engaged before because I'm not going to lie, growing up, like I was not that big of a reader. Like there'll be every now and then that you get that book that I was like, okay, I resonate with this. There's something about this that I see in myself and it's interesting for me. But when you're reading like all of the just like classical greats of a bunch of dead white men that were, so old in the past in like the 16th, 15th, 17th century, you don't have that same connection that you do. And so even getting into college, like that's probably why I was so focused on African American literature within the field of African American studies because all of it was something that I didn't really know was a thing, but just reading about Black people, reading about Black life, seeing the archives and like seeing firsthand people's letters to each other, first manuscripts of things written by Black authors, playwrights, poets was so mind blowing to me because it was like, wow, like these are people who looked like me who did these great things. And it's like, okay, maybe I should take writing more seriously. Maybe I should do more with my writing and like try to really get myself out there when it comes to writing, because these people did it. They set the, they set the bar, they paved the road for people after them. But, unfortunately, we have so many different people in our society that are muddying up that road, that are throwing rocks and gravel and everything to make that road hard to go down. But I'm just so happy that, Black people are writing books, Tiffany Haddish writing this children's book, because I think that now is a time where we need more Black authors writing about Black characters and
Yeah.
centering Blackness in these stories, because unfortunately, so many people are trying to take this stuff out of school. So many people are trying to erase Black people out of history, other than, oh, Martin Luther King did a march, but they don't want to talk about what the march was for or how Martin Luther King died or any of that stuff. But
Yeah.
he did a march. This is the only Black person we find acceptable. We don't want other Black characters, because then it's going to make the white kids uncomfortable, because they're not seeing themselves like, oh, white people not being represented. What a concept.
Yeah. I've always had a fondness for YA fantasy stories growing up. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, there were no Black protagonists in any of the stories I read. It was, and to some degree still is, depressing, because for years I searched for leads that reflected my experience, and yet they were very far in between or only halfway there. Like, as a Black person, my race was represented in shows like Martin, Half and Half, and other Black shows. And as a gay person, my sexuality was represented in shows like Queer as Folk and Will and Grace. However, I'm not just a gay person, and I'm not
Mhm.
just a Black person. I'm a
Right.
gay and Black person at the same time. And representation for that type of intersectionality did not always exist outside of stereotypical caricatures, religious trauma, or hate crimes. So growing up, I never really felt truly seen in the media or represented. And I had no characters that I could identify with, because even though I could identify with being Black, many of the Black shows I grew up with were aggressively homophobic. And while I also identify with being gay, the white gay shows I watched growing up were about the white gay experience. If Black gays appeared on the show, they had very little screen time and were just probably background characters for the most part. Gay Black people aren't afforded the same diversity in storytelling as white gay people, even in 2022. Like, so I understand where Tiffany is coming from, because that's where I'm coming from as a gay Black author. I know that for me, I read fantasy stories as a form of escapism. Like, I wanted to immerse myself in a fantasy world where I could identify with the hero, fight the forces of evil and save the day. But as much as I did enjoy the books like, Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Beautiful Creatures, I could never fully be transported into their worlds, because all of the leads were white, speaking with white voices and white experiences and living white lives. Like, I want to create the stories I wish I could have had growing up, with protagonists that look like me, that I can fully connect to. I want Black gay teens to have a story that celebrates how they love, how they speak, and who they are, because even though shows I watched growing up helped me learn to love who I am and discover my identity, the fact that I had to basically Frankenstein an understanding of who I am, instead of just having both of my intersectional identities represented in the media, is a problem. But Daquon, I want to ask you though, like, was there a particular book that's helped you in your self-discovery / self-love journey?
Yes, and it came into like my life, fairly recently. There's this book that's All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, which is this memoir about this gay Black man and, his life. And I think that it came at a point that was like so pivotal in my life. I just moved to New York, and I was just exploring New York, and I came across this like pop-up bookshop, and I was like, okay, let me like explore, peruse a little bit. And I was just like buying a couple books, and the person who was like running the shop asked me like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, I'm a teacher. And he was like, oh, you are? And he just started handing me book after book after book. And this was a book that I saw, and I was like, I want it, but like I'm not sure if I can get it. Like, there's other books right here that I think would be more interesting. I just didn't like see it, but I knew that, like, I knew when he handed me that book, I was like, okay, this is a sign that I need to read this book, that there's something in this book that I need on my journey. And so I read bits and pieces of it every now and then, but I really started getting deep into it after I left my teaching job, and I was just like unemployed in New York City, not knowing like what was I doing? Like, what was my life? Where was I going to go? Like, how am I going to go about life? And I would just take these walks in Central Park, find somewhere and just sit and read this book. And I would literally cry sometimes because I saw that Black queer representation that I've never really saw in books. It was so powerful because there was so many situations that I was like, wow, like that's an experience that matches mine. Those are feelings that I had going through college that matched mine. And so I was like, this is the representation that I needed. This was literally telling me that your experience, of course, is unique to your own, but also people are going through similar things. People are feeling similar things. So you and your experience is not alone. And, this is one of the books that, is being targeted by this book ban that's happening all across America, where, they're trying to keep these books out of stores and everything's because it's corrupting the youth or whatever. And it's like, this was a super powerful book for me that I encountered being 22, and I can only imagine like how much of a difference it would have made even just a couple of years earlier, finding this book at like 18 or 19. And so again, this is why representation is so important, because it's like I felt so heard. Like I was literally going through an experience where I was just like numb to the outside world, and then all of a sudden I'm bawling in Central Park. And like I'm not one of those people to cry. Like I no, I don't show emotions, especially in public, but this book right here did a number on me.
For me, the book that changed my life, honestly, and still does, like it's one of the most influential pieces of literature I've ever read. And it's Who Owns the Ice House? And Daquon already knows. It's by Clifton Tolbert and Gary Shognerger, I think his last name is. But it was such a powerful piece of it was honestly all the life advice that I needed at the time that I got it. Because for me, we had to read this story, me and Daquon, for our class, our entrepreneur class. What was it? Service learning? Yeah, service learning.
Service learning.
And it was one of the last classes I took in my senior year. And I have to say that in that particular school, also the teacher as well, it shaped everything that I do even now. Like the lessons that I learned from that book were more influential and important than anything I learned in the fucking 12 years I was in school. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like in my entire, tenure as a student, even when I was in college, like this book has taught me so much more about life and living than any book I've ever read. And it's because, once again, it was somebody who looked like me telling the story, someone who understood being Black and what that means in that story, and also giving me advice, the father that I never had. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Basically imparting on me this wisdom that I would have never gotten had I not read this story and had I not, taken that class. And it was so powerful to me. I always go back to, I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but the opportunity lesson with Miss James, our teacher, was such a fucking powerful It was so powerful to me because basically the whole thing is, you miss 100% of the opportunities you don't take. But sometimes some people are so, wrapped up in all of the fears of what happens if they do take it and don't take it and weighing the options that sometimes the opportunity passes by them altogether. And
Right.
so this particular teacher, when we were taking this test, it was a test, and at the end of the test, it said at the beginning, read all the questions of the test. And at the end of the test, it said, if you read all the questions of the test, go ahead and write 100 on your paper and then turn it in because you found the golden opportunity. And it was only a 15-minute window for us to be able to do that. But I was just sitting there and I was just second guessing myself. Oh, this can't be real. It's not real. Like, I can't do that. Like, it's not, I don't know. And just second guessing myself over and over and over again. The time ran out and the opportunity was lost. And I realized then that if you don't take a chance on yourself, the rest of the world won't either. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. Even if it does feel like it's, crazy or outlandish, as long as you've done your research, as long as you have weighed the options in a reasonable amount of time, what are you going to lose? What do you have to lose?
Literally. And I think that's so important because so many times people who look like us, people who are marginalized, are told by society that they don't deserve these opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And then we begin to internalize that. And so when that golden opportunity comes, it's like, this can't be for me. I can't possibly deserve this opportunity because I've been told so many times that I don't deserve it, that I don't deserve to achieve these levels. And it's like, no, you deserve any opportunity that comes on your doorstep. Let me say that again. You deserve any opportunity that knocks on your door because that is your opportunity to take. And, there will be a time when you take an opportunity and it doesn't end up happening like you wanted to be. Like, I took this job teaching and I was like, oh, like, this is a great opportunity. Like, this is exactly what I want to be doing. Like, this school has all of my social justice mindset, but then it wasn't the opportunity that I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
But it ended up still leaving me in a better place than I was before. And so even if I never took that opportunity, I probably would not have been here because, yeah, it's a fail, quote unquote, because the opportunity didn't end up being as golden as I thought it would be. But I still moved forward. I still learned from it. I still grew from it. And I'm at a better place now than I was before. So still golden in my eyes.
Exactly. And I also think that people really need to be aware of the fact that you really have to take a chance on yourself because nobody else is. Like, nobody else is. The world is not a very fair place. And so the fact that, you have to, and I don't like the term because I've seen this thing on TikTok. People are like, be delusional or whatever, like be delusional, and I'm just like, no, it's not delusion. It's knowing your worth. It's knowing your talent.
Period. I know my worth.
Exactly. So know who you are. Know that you are that bitch and let the world see and experience you as that bitch.
So when are you taking this opportunity to publish a book?
Oh, baby, it's coming this year. Oh, baby, you ain't got to worry about that. It's coming, baby. Oh, it's coming.
But that's a conversation for another day.